Hi, welcome back to another demonstration for the Unitrends System Administration course. In this how-to video tutorial, we're going to look at agent-based file-level backup jobs. Now, just as a reminder, I'm in my lab here, and I'm going to log into my local source Satori user interface. I'm going to use now my own username and password that I've created when I configured the appliance. As just of a reminder, you'll notice here I have 46 not protected assets. Just as a quick glance, if you filter on false or true, you'll notice I have no true protected assets yet. If I look across this list and I want to focus on the instance name really, and anything without an instance now, that's a file level node asset. We're going to be scheduling backups against these file level nodes in this module. So once again, you can kind of see that in your dashboard. Now, as I showed you in the asset management, there's a couple of quick different ways that you can create backup jobs. And here we're talking about agent-based file level backup jobs. So under the Protect tab, if you highlight your appliance and you're going to schedule these in groups, you could filter on the asset name one at a time, or maybe you have some names in common, and you can schedule in groups by highlighting the multiple servers and clicking Backup at the top. You'll notice it surrounds it in the agent-based backup. What do you want a backup question? Here you can change it to different backup types, but it automatically highlighted those two machines for me. And I can go in and customize and edit the settings for the inclusion, exclusion, or the advanced pre and post commands. Now, if you think back to your Excel sheet, I've got my Excel sheet opened here. This is a list of my clients by name. I've sorted them by their priority and their groupings by asset type and priority. And I've also identified them in their schedules that they're going to be in by groups. And I've also labeled the includes and exclude columns for each of these servers as well too. Now I do have another exclusion that I do want to make sure I get on this list, which is going to be the S drive. So we're going to say no S drive for the RDR server agent-based asset. We don't want anything off of the S drive. Here we're doing no S drive on SharePoint, and on my Win Hyper-V server here, I have no N or V drives. We're going to be creating those agent-based file level groups and schedules. You can see they're in similar groups in here as well too. We're going to be creating those schedules. Now you also notice down here at the bottom I have my schedule details as well too. I've got my file level agent-based schedule details right in here. I'm going to take those details and create recovery points and recurrences around these backup types in each of these jobs and when these are supposed to run, what days of the week and what recurrence time for each of these backup types. So I'm going to slide that off to the side. I'm going to be using that Excel sheet as we go through this demonstration. So the first group of machines I'm going to create for you is going to be a file level week full 24-hour incremental. And once again, there's a couple of different ways I can do this. I could filter on here. I've got those two marked right now already. The only server that's actually in this group of those two is my Win Hyper-V though. But I'm also going to be making sure that I add in my DC Exchange too. So I can filter on that so I can see it real quick so I can check it on the list. Now you'll notice both my DC Exchange 2 and my Win Hyper-V agent should have stayed checked. I don't know why it didn't check. There it goes. Okay, so now those two are checked. Okay, so now if I want to turn on my SQL SharePoint 2, I can down here, I can filter on SQL SharePoint 2 and I can highlight that asset. Now I've got SQL SharePoint 2 highlighted. Seems to be clearing those checks off there. So I want to make sure I go back and check those other ones back on, I guess. I cannot use that filter to select multiples. But you can now see I'm building this list off of all the clients that are in this group. The only other server I want in this group is going to be my Linux server 2, which is in my list here. I don't want to filter because I'll lose the other checks I have. So I'm just going to keep sorting down the list until I see it. Linux server 2. There is the agent-based backup for Linux server 2. Notice once again that these are all of my assets. Databases for Oracle. I've got my NAS in here. I've got my Exchange databases. It shows every asset because I'm highlighted once again on the appliance. But those are all my agent-based assets that I want to create in a group. And I can now see that when I go to create the backup job, those assets are highlighted. Now, you can see that's a little bit more difficult of a road when you're dealing with assets. So the easiest way to deal with assets is really just to go over to jobs and just start creating your brand new job here. Just by clicking on create job and starting a backup job and telling it you only want to see your assets, now that's a much cleaner list to go down and say DC Exchange, Linux Server 2, SQL, and WinHyper-V. Much easier to go through that quick list of just your assets rather than looking at the big list of all assets. I'm going to show you that trick when you get into some SQL and Exchange and VMware scheduling. That becomes a little bit easier to look at in groups depending on how you're naming machines or databases. Now, when you look at setting job inventory settings, these are protection rules for each client, each machine. These are going to be saved into the job once we rename it and save it and set our recurrence on the next screen. We do have to make sure if we wanted to add any inclusions or exclusions to these machines that we want to make sure we go through these inventory settings inside of this job details. So to do that, we'll start at the top of this list here. For our DC Exchange, if I look at my Excel sheet for the DC Exchange, I don't want any media extensions. So I want to build an exclusion list here, and I can say that I don't want any *.avi extensions. Maybe I don't want any *.mp3. We automatically remember from the file level module that you saw, we have our set of default exclusions that we already apply. So you don't have to worry about excluding TMP or the temp directories. You can browse out. You don't have to worry about excluding the recycle bins. We're automatically going to exclude some of this stuff. You don't have to go through that server. Pick out the temporary stuff. Only stuff you know you don't want. Maybe you don't want AVIs or MP3s, right? We're going to show you a few more examples of that as we go through a few more servers here, a few more assets. Now, we're going to go ahead and save those, and you'll notice those exclusions show up in the protection rules column here now. If you keep going down your list, there are no exclusions for the Linux server. We're going to grab everything off of that machine, right from the root of all local volumes. For the SQL SharePoint server, if I look at my Excel sheet, I do have some exclusions here as well. I could browse into this machine, and I can check the S drive. I can drag it over, or I can type it in. Type it in and click Add. Now, once again, in this Excel sheet here, they don't want any AVIs or MP3s off of this server also. So no AVIs, no MP3s, and no S drive for the SQL SharePoint server. Now, once again, you know, your planning sheets, these really are going to help drive and help make this installation a lot easier for you in setting these things up, knowing exactly what you want to grab off of that machine. The other set we have to set here based on our Excel sheet is the WinHyper-V. We could browse once again to the Hyper-V drive, and I'm going to exclude my entire V drive because it's all my virtual machines hosted off that drive. I'm also going to exclude the N drive because we're going to show you here how to use this as a NAS for Unitrends in a future module. All right, it's basically a CIF share. I don't want to protect that or back it up through the NAS agent, so I'm going to exclude that entire volume as well too. Now, on a Hyper-V server through the agent, you may want to go through and exclude the user's public directory. That's where Hyper-V might put a few configuration things that we really can't use from the agent side anyways. Might save you a few gigs there as well. All right, once again, you could add the no media extensions here as well too. You know, maybe no AVIs, no MP3s. Once again, that can, if you install some software, it could save you some space. So once again, a little bit larger of a list here. Once again, you'll see that list highlighted here inside of the protection rules for that asset node now. Now on the next screen over here, before I start to schedule it, now's when I'll go ahead and name it, get it a little bit more specific. In this case, we're going to use the keyword agent to say that it is an agent-based file level backup. We are going to say that we are going to run a week full with daily, or instead of the word daily, sometimes I might like to use maybe an RPO of a 24-hour incremental during the week. And you could say maybe here you might want to use maybe a weekday if you're going to run them Monday through Friday. You could try to use a word like that. Now, I will tell you that there is a limitation to the length of the schedule. Right, so there is a schedule length that you have to pay attention to. We'll see if that is too long here when we get to that point. Now we're ready to go ahead and set up our recurrence. And if I look at the Schedules tab, once again, in my Excel sheet that I laid out, I know that this schedule is going to be using a full with incrementals policy. I'm going to run weekly fulls with daily incrementals Monday through Friday. Now, my Sunday full is going to run at 3 o'clock in the morning every Sunday, but I don't want that to start until this next Sunday, which is going to be the 6th in my case. You want to go ahead and schedule this first master on the first day you want those masters to run, or you will get a master tonight at this time if the time has not passed already. Now, it's already past 3 a.m., so it would not schedule another master on me, but just in case, it's always a good rule of thumb to make sure you, once again, don't leave this on today's date. Make sure you go ahead and point this to the first Sunday or whatever Friday, Saturday, weekly occurrence day that you're going to be setting. I'll show you that in future modules and other modules. You'll get the hang of that. We do want this to run starting on Sunday at 3 a.m., recurring every Sunday. Now, once again, we are running a full with incremental schedule, so now you can see down here at the bottom, it does open up an incremental schedule details section. Once again, we took off the Saturday already. We do want our incrementals to start today, and we're going to run these incrementals every night, which means it's really going to start tonight at 3 a.m. We're going to get our first set of incrementals. All right, now that's recurring every 24 hours, so I don't have to worry about setting this. It's just going to recur once a day at this time, Monday through Friday once again. Now we've got some options over here for setting the storage. Once again, you may have different storage you can point to. In a default installation, physical appliances, you're going to see one internal storage. That's usually the default. There is the verify backups here. It just really turns on an inline verification. The backups are already verified through the VSS process. If we see bad blocks on the disk and integrity issues with the disk, we're going to notify you. This turns on an inline verification, slows down the backups just a little bit. Once again, you always really want to make sure you're including the job results in the report. And once again, you want to make sure you're including all failures, too. That way you get a direct email if anything fails out of a schedule. All right, we're going to go ahead and save this schedule. Looks like we made it in the schedule name length there as well, too. And once again, the more detailed you are in this schedule name, somebody coming in behind you months later, he'll know what that schedule is doing. That's an agent-based file-level week full with a weekday 24-hour incremental, Monday through Friday. And you can kind of see over here in the schedule details as well, too, what this recurrence looks like for this particular group of assets. Right? You can also view the details here, and you can also see the assets that are listed within that particular schedule. You can't see the includes or excludes in this detail page. You do have to edit that schedule to go in and see those protection rules laid out for you once again. And from here, you can modify and change those protection rules, the includes, exclusions, or pre or post commands. Now, this schedule has been created. I can wait till tonight, till 3 o'clock in the morning, or if you can spare the resources, you could kick this group of servers off now. I've got one more schedule to create for agent-based file level. It's against 2 assets. All right, if I look back at my cattle, pets, and people, my spreadsheet, once again, I've got 2 assets that are in this group. It's my Win 7 desktop and my RDR server 2. The agent-based asset for RDR Server 2 and my Win 7 desktop, they are going to be in a agent-based file level 12-hour incremental forever. So I'm going to create a new backup job. I'm going to pick my 2 assets off the list, which is RDR Server 2 and the Win 7 desktop. Once again, we have just set up in our protection rules a new S drive exclusion for the for the RDR Server 2. So I'm going to go ahead and instead of browsing for that, I'm just going to type it in. I'm not going to do any media extensions here on RDR, just the S drive. All right, and the Win 7 desktop, this is a workstation. This is my workstation that I'm logged into in this environment. I don't need to recover the entire machine. I'm going to do a virtual snapshot of it through the VMware side of it because it's actually a virtual machine. But we put an agent on it. I want to make sure I go into this machine. I'm going to show you how to create an inclusion list in this case. And if you look at the Excel sheet once again for the details of what we want to do with our Win 7 desktop, we want to grab an inclusion of the users only directory. All right, so we're going to break down our C drive here, and we're going to grab the users only directory. We're going to go ahead and save that. Now, I can do an inclusion and I can do an exclusion at the same time. The key is that the exclusion has to be rooted from your inclusions. If I only include the users off the C, then I have to do an exclusion rooted off of that users directory as well. Now, if I look at the list, I want to grab users public and add that to my exclusion list because I don't want anything off the users public. Now, also off of workstations, it's a good idea to add in maybe any AVIs or MP3s. Really, unless you know they're a media content developer, right? You wouldn't add that exclusion to their workstation. Right, once again, pre and post commands, if you need to start or stop any databases or services, you can always put those commands through as well too. So here we've got an inclusion that's rooted off of users, right? That's the only thing we're going to grab is the users directory, but from within that directory, we're going to exclude users public, and we're not going to grab any AVIs or MP3s. This is a very common list for workstations and laptops. We're going to go ahead and go to the next screen, and here's where I'd like to go ahead and give this thing a little bit more detail in the schedule. Agent-based file level, and this is a weekday 12-hour incremental forever. This is an agent-based 12-hour incremental forever. We're going to run it Monday through Fridays only, though. We're going to leave it on incremental forever here as the scheduled type because we're not going to run any fulls. Our first scheduled backup will run a full automatically for us for the system. We're going to leave it on today's date. We want it to start today. If you look at the schedule details of this, our incrementals are going to run at 1:30 p.m. and 1:30 a.m. So we're going to set this first time to our first a.m. start time. It's going to be 1:30 a.m. All right, we're going to recur this every 12 hours. That means it's going to run, should be at 1:30 a.m. And we're going to recur it every 12 hours. Now, if I look at 1:30 a.m., that's 1:30 p.m., that 12-hour clock is going to reset at midnight. Then it's going to start at 1:30 again, 12 hours again, and it resets each time. You don't have to worry about this until time. You kind of got to do some math here to figure out if I need to mess with that time. But in this case, 12 hours, this resets. I don't need to. Once again, you're going to check your storage, change any verification options, and usually leave the job results and the job failures checked so you get emails based on these schedules. All right, we're going to go ahead and save this job schedule. Right, you can see it's now in our job manager, in our list. I can see the assets for this job. I can edit this job, and I can see the actual protection rules for each of those machines in that job down here at the bottom as well too. Now, if I do go to my dashboard, I want to show you really quickly some expected results here. We've created schedules, but we don't have any backups yet. So if I go to the protected report here, protection summary report, in the dashboard I can click on any of those two top values. Down towards the bottom, in the backups section now, I can see that I've scheduled backups against these assets. I've not ran any backups yet. Now, if I want to go over to my jobs over here, let's take our smallest group, and we'll go ahead and kick this backup job off, and I'll go to the active jobs, and we'll watch this job run for a few minutes. You can view the details in here of each of these nodes. Okay, I still have a full in the system for the Win 7 desktop, so it's grabbing an incremental, and I don't have a full for the RDR, so it's grabbing a new full for the RDR server. You can see those details here in the summary. All right, so we'll go ahead and watch those jobs run for a few minutes, and then we'll show you the expected results when the jobs are finished. You can see down here at the bottom that the Win 7 desktop has already started to transmit data, about 32 megs. This thing will pick up speed. The RDR server, it's done with its snapshot, its VSS from the client, the agent, and now it's starting to transfer speed, transfer data as well. You will see these pick up speed. Okay, it is sharing concurrent connection, so it is running 2 backup jobs at once right now. The more backup jobs you run at once, the slower they will run. That comes into the CPU per concurrent connection that you learn about in setting up the configuration of the appliances. All right. You can see those jobs running down here in the dashboard. Little trick, if you can't see everything, you don't like scrolling in your dashboard, you can hold down the control key and it will resize the fonts within our dashboard so maybe you can see everything without having to scroll the entire dashboard. Once again, hold down the control key and roll your scroll bar, or your scroll on your mouse, up or down. You can decrease it or increase the font. If you can't read the screen, you want to zoom into something you can't read, you can do that as well too, but then you got to scroll around the screen. So be aware of that. I'm going to leave mine right there for you. I can see my entire dashboard. You can see those jobs running down here at the bottom. If I want to view the active jobs, I can click on the job details here, and I can once again see that job running now, and I can toggle between these two. You can see now that this transfer speed here is picked up drastically because this job is actually done already. Not sure why it's not off the queue there. Now it's off the queue if I refresh back and forth, but it's already done. If I go over to my recovery catalog, filter on my Win 7 desktop over here, you'll notice I don't have any backups for it. One of the things I've set in there, and you want to make sure you take off successes to see the Win 7 desktop, because one of the things I have in there is a warning for that incremental already. If I go back in time here and refilter a little bit farther, I've already got my first full that I ran back on the 22nd of February in this lab. But I've got that first full I ran back there that gave a warning. If I go into the details of this job, and to get to the details of it, I have to go back to the reports, and I want to run a backup history report all the way back to February, because that's where that backup is. It's all the way back here. I've got a full for the RDR today in March that's running right now. It's not done. But here's the two backups for my Win 7 desktop in this report. Now, if I want to view the details of why this gave a warning in here, I can click on any one of these records, and it brings up the details of that job for me. If I scroll down here a little bit, it says the system environment metadata was excluded from backup. All right, that's the boot volume, the sys volume, basically the entire C drive. Because not all critical volumes are included, Windows Instant Recovery is not possible for this backup. It's basically telling me that I can't do any integrated bare metal recovery of this machine, which I know because I only want the user's directory. Now, to fix this issue, to get rid of this warning, if you're okay with the warning, you just kind of have to remember, once again, that when you filter here, you have to make sure you filter all the way back to the date here. We're going to go all the way back to February 1st. And I took off successes. That way I can see that Win 7 desktop warning back there. If you're okay with remembering that you set this up on purpose and you want to leave that warning because you know you can't instant recovery it, then you're okay. You can archive these. You can replicate them. The backups are still technically good. I can go into this newest incremental, and I can recover files from it, and I can view the entire user's directory minus public. It's empty because I excluded it. All right, everything else is here. Here's my administrator documents folder. All right, a bunch of stuff in there. It's a good backup. I can recover any file I need to from that backup chain, that backup group. Now, if you want to fix this issue, though, you want to get rid of that warning, you have to use our legacy interface. And to get to our legacy interface up here in the config wheel at the top, you open the legacy interface. Now, this interface, once again, is built on the Flash, so you do have to make sure you're using a web browser that does support Flash. I'm just going to log into this interface with my same credentials. Now, when I created that backup job in Satori, it created a backup job in the legacy interface under the appliance in the backup tab at the top. You can go to the schedules tab in the main stage, and you can now see those schedules that were created in Satori. If you think back to your Excel sheet, you know that the Win 7 desktop is in the weekday 12-hour incremental schedule. It's a part of that schedule right there. It doesn't say it in the details. It says to see the schedule for the list of clients. That tells me it's a group. Now, if I view and modify this schedule, and you can see the Win 7 desktop is checked in this schedule, I want to focus on the exclusion tab. In the exclusion tab down here, under that button for the Win 7 desktop, I can see that this thing is a Satori exclusion list for client 23 in the agent file level weekday 12-hour incremental forever schedule. It's exclude list 126 JO25 client 23. If I go over to the selection list page here, I'll see that same list. JO26, or exclude 126, JO25, client 23, and it's from the file level 12-hour incremental forever schedule. You want to highlight that schedule so it becomes dark blue, and you want to view modify at the bottom. You can see those list of the protection rules that we see in Satori are there for us. But you'll notice up here at the top that the operating system family is not defined. So we want to drop this down to Windows. It's up in the upper right-hand corner here. You'll notice that when we drop this down to Windows, we can now check the Exclude System State button. You'll see a warning that pops up that says excluding the system state should only be used for backing up data volumes. And that's what we're doing. We're only backing up a data volume here. All right, you'll not be able to recover the system from this backup. It says a restore of this backup will not be able to recover the system itself. Right? We know that. We've done an include list of users only. Now, when you save this new option in here, it just tells you that it's already a part of an existing schedule, and we know that. We're just going to go ahead and say yes to make sure we update that complete schedule now with these changes. Over here in my jobs, I've got my RDR server backup job running. It's about 4 gigs. It's not quite done yet. Now, this server is still active from this schedule. If I go over to my job managers and I'm highlighted on that schedule and I say run now again, it says this schedule is active and cannot be modified at this time. So I can't manually run it there again right now. I have to wait. So we'll go ahead back over here to the active jobs, and we'll wait a few more minutes on this job to finish up. You can see my backup here. It's been running for about 18 minutes. Now, I'm not sure why in my interface I can't see that now button to kick this backup off, but I want to show you another way in the legacy interface that you can start up custom backups that you've already created in the Satori. You kind of have a little bit more flexibility to kick off a few backups you want with the settings you want for particular assets. Maybe you don't want to kick off, once again, a whole big group. Like maybe I don't want to kick off every server that's in this group right now during the day. Right, but maybe I can kick off the DC and Exchange and the Linux server too during the day by themselves. If I go in and try to edit this schedule right now, I take off a couple of these servers, I go to the next button, I don't see a run now option in here. I can only modify the schedule. And if I run now, it's going to run everything in that group. Right? That's not a good idea. Right? So what I would suggest then is once again, you can open up the legacy interface. I've already logged in here. I've got it opened up. I showed you how to get in there earlier. And once again, under the backup section, you have your schedules that you created in here. All right, so if I want to kick off now that Win 7 desktop by itself, I can come in and modify this schedule. And you'll notice, actually, I want to show you first that if you go to the one-time backup tab in here, this is blank canvas. You have to remember, if you ever used the legacy interface before, you have to remember or know which list goes with which client. So I'd have to remember that this list goes over here with this particular client, and then I have to remember, oh yeah, it has an include too, right? So there's an include for this client, right? And you have to remember to put those all in place. I don't know why it won't let me drop that off there. But anyways, you have to remember to set all those, right? Oh, here we go, full. All right, but I think you get the idea. Now, what I want to show you that once again is if this is blank, you can actually go over here and pull this schedule up first, once again. So you can view, modify this schedule. Then if you go over to the one-time backup tab over here, you'll notice that all this stuff is already populated for you anyways. You don't have to remember which one goes with which. You're just going to make sure you take off the server you don't want to run the full on, or the backup type on. So it's only going to run against this Win 7 desktop. It's going to ignore that these lists are set because this server's not checked. All right, so now I can go ahead and start this backup up outside of any schedule I just kicked off that backup manually through the legacy interface. Right, here's the Win 7 desktop master right here. You can see that last success warning here is still on the legacy interface. It just drops off the Satori interface right away. Here you can see the RDR master running as well too. And now we call them fulls everywhere, but it's a full. Right? Full is a master in the legacy interface. That little trick can be applied to running any server. Once again, one more time, I'm here at a blank canvas. If I go over to this schedule, maybe I want to run my Linux server backup, I can pull up this entire group here. I go over to the one-time backup tab. I take off any servers I don't want to run this against. I go over here to a full, and I start this backup job based on its settings. So now in my job queue, I now have my Linux server full running for the first time as well, and I have my Win 7 desktop full running a new full based on those new settings. This full should be 100% successful and green moving forward. I should be able to see it in my normal recovery catalog once it's done. So we'll let these jobs finish up. We'll come back and show you the expected results and some proper restore catalogs once all of these jobs finish up. And once again, you can keep monitoring them in here, the job statuses, how much data it's copied. You'll notice here the progress bars for the file level agent backups, they're not exactly accurate. They'll say 1% until they're done. They'll go from 1 to 100. You kind of really have to know how big your server is down here to get a reading on how long it's going to take, right? Once again, the progress bar for agent-based file level backups is not very accurate up here. You kind of have to know how big your servers are. I know my Win 7 desktop's about 6 gigs. I know my Linux server's about 25. I know my RDR's about 20. All right, I have to know that, and then I'll know how big this machine is going to get. So we'll let those finish up, then we'll come back and show you some restore catalogs in the recovery here. Some backup catalogs. Right now I don't have any successful backups. Nothing's filtering properly. Once again, if I take this filter off and go back a little bit farther, I can see those warnings that I do have in the system for my Win 7 desktop. All right, pretty cool. Once again, over here in my dashboard, still nothing with a green protected backup. So I still have nothing with a true status, once again, because I have not ran any successful fulls or masters yet. All right, so we'll go ahead and keep an eye on these. And once again, we'll come back and show you these backups when they're done. Now you can still see these backups running inside of this interface here under the active jobs. They're a little bit farther here now. The Win 7 desktop's about 55%. You can see that once you actually run your original full, your first full, then we can go ahead and start gauging how big or how a little bit more accurate on that progress. You can see now it's 55%. I told you it's about 6 gigs. It's pretty accurate now. But once again, these are the first fulls for the Linux server and the RDR, so they're not going to register until it knows how big that server is after the first full. All right, so we'll go ahead and keep watching these a little bit farther. All right, so we can see here now our Win 7 desktop's about 97%. It's just over 6 gigs, so that thing should be finishing up really soon. Then we'll be able to look at the restore catalogs or the backup catalogs under the recovery tab over here. We'll be able to look at the backup catalogs under the recovery tab. You can see that job quickly went off the list once it was completed. It doesn't stay on this active job when it's done. Whether it fails or finishes or anything, when it's done being active, it's off this list. You either have to go over to your recent jobs to see that history, and here is the Win 7 desktop now completely successful new full. It's done, and it's one of our recent jobs here. You can see that. Here's the previous warning that we can view that same information that we pulled up the backups report. That's another way you can get to those jobs. Now, this is recent jobs, so we couldn't go all the way back to that original full. I wanted to show you that original full, so that's why I ran that backup report dated all the way back to February 1st. That pulled up the actual backup report. We were able to see both backups, the original full that gave a warning and this incremental. Now, this complete successful here, you'll notice that it does not give any warnings down here. It knows that it's been excluded from the backup and instant recovery is not possible, so you still see that in the details, but it's not giving you a warning about it anymore. It knows that you set that up on purpose, so it gives a 100% successful. If you go over to your recovery catalog now you see, without having to add or move any filtering over here, you now see that Win 7 desktop because it's part of the default filter for the last 7 days as a normal backup here. That's part of that filter. All right, we'll learn about more of these backup types as you go through further modules. All right, but now I see that 100% successful full. All right, now inside of this recovery catalog, you'll see this in the recovery module, but still part of a verification process to check your backups. You want to make sure you can go in and see this catalog. Is it what you expect to see for this machine? Is it all drives, all volumes? Is it the content, the data that you expect to see from a file level agent for this asset? You're going to want to do that for every completed job that runs within your schedules and within your assets, right? Now, in my dashboard, we have a completed protected asset. If I look through this list and I now start to filter on true, I do have a completed successful full for my Win 7 desktop. And if I look down inside of this schedule here, it's now ran from this schedule 2 backups, 1 successful, the new full, and 1 warning, the previous incrementals warning. You know, it's also able to customize this as well too, and you're actually able to add the next backup job order, which is the schedule name basically. So now you can see which schedule those jobs are a part of. All right, I have 6 assets that are scheduled, or 6 jobs that have ran here, or that are scheduled. It's pretty cool. Once again, back to the job status over here. I can look at the active jobs. These jobs, once again, are going to continue to run. They're a little bit larger machines. I can go between these 2 statuses. Linux server's about 1/4 of the way done. RDR's about half the way done. All right, we'll go ahead and let those keep running for a few more minutes. We'll come back and maybe check out those catalogs as well too before we end this demonstration. All right, one of the other cool things I wanted to show you about, managing agent-based file-level schedules. You can wait for these jobs to run, and then, whenever you set your next recurring incremental, those first initial fulls would kick off based on your schedule, right? I showed you how to pick out certain jobs and run a few jobs now, run the entire schedule now. We showed you how to do that kind of stuff. But what I want to really show you, too, is that in your job manager, if you really take a look at your schedules over here and you slide these things around, you can break out and really see the details of your schedule. So you can see that you've got a Sunday full running at 3 a.m., and then incrementals Monday through Friday at 3 a.m. And then here you can see you've got an incremental forever every 12 hours. You can see the last run, that's when we kicked off the job. You can see here it's going to run again at 1:30 this afternoon for me. And by then, both of those machines will have fulls, and at 1:30, it'll kick off incrementals. Right? The other machines besides the Linux machine, because we kicked it off manually. So the other 3 machines in this group down here, all right, these other 3 machines, tonight at 3 o'clock, they'll get their first set of fulls. Then I'll be able to go in and view the recovery catalogs on those, right, the backup catalogs, and make sure that I can view the catalogs and see that they are the correct content for those assets once again. Highlight the newest point in times and go in and make sure that you can see that this is the correct data volumes for the machine and it's correct. But you can always see on the job details over here on when these things are going to run next, so you have a really good idea of when these things are going to run. Is it during the day? And I can see here that this one's going to run at 1:30 this afternoon. Well, once again, that's our smaller group that we're supposed to have recovery points every 12 hours on. So now really at 1:30 this afternoon, when it gets its next incremental, it'll start doing 12 hours every 12 hours after that, 1:30 tonight as well too. All right, and after 1:30, this will flip over to 1:30 a.m. as its next runtime. And you'll see the last runtime in here as 1:30 p.m. These will kind of switch. A little bit of how to read those schedule details in here. Once again, you can slide these things around so maybe you can see more of that schedule detail in there for you. All right, now we can see the rest of those jobs are done that ran from that schedule. We can see here if we look back at the schedule manager now, the job manager now, that this job ran at 1:30 as it was supposed to be. Now it's going to run at 1:30 again in the morning. If we go over to recent jobs, we can see that both of those assets in that same job now ran successfully. And if we go over to the recovery tab here and look at our backup catalog, we now see that both servers have new fulls and both servers have incrementals. We don't have to go back and filter, we don't have to go back and filter on the, all backups, and look at for the failures and warnings. Here we see that first warning that ran from the incremental. And once again, if you go all the way back to February here, you see the first initial full for Win 7 desktop back here all the way on February 22nd. So just a little bit more working with the catalogs here. You can also filter on RDR over here, and then you'd only see the RDR asset. Or once again, maybe you only want to see the Win 7 desktop asset. You can filter on the Win 7 over here. You can also filter on the backup types. Whatever backup types you have in the system, it starts to show those in here on the list. So here's all my fulls for Win 7. I have a successful and a warning. If I want to take off the filter at the top and refilter, here's my fulls for Win 7 and RDR Server 2. All right, so just a little bit more working with backup catalogs. Once again, we'll have a few more catalogs to look at once this Linux server here is completed. I did tell you it's a little bit over 30 gigs. I thought maybe it was between 25 and 35. So it's got just a little bit longer to go, so we'll keep an eye on that one as it keeps running. So there we can see the Linux server finally cleared off the list. Once again, if you go over to recent jobs, you can now see that on this Linux server, we ran that one on demand, remember. But here you can see that Linux server. It has completed successfully. So again, once again, over in your recovery tab now, you see all 3 assets, and you see that new full for the Linux server. Once again, over under jobs, that server was a part of this job. We ran it separate, so the schedule still says never in here. And now if we try to simulate that it's 3 o'clock in the morning, or if you can manually kick that group off, you want to run, that whole server group, you can do that. All right, you can go ahead and click run. Now that's going to run those backups now. And remember, we already have a full for our Linux server. So it's going to run fulls on Hyper-V, SQL, and Exchange at the same time. So you can kick those schedules off. You can keep an eye on them. Once again, check the recent jobs when you're done. Check to make sure you can go into the recovery catalogs of these. Are they the right volumes? If I go into this newest incremental point in time and I go to recover files, is this the correct drive? Do I see everything in the drive? Remember, we did exclude the S drive, and I don't see that in here. So this server is set up correctly. So go ahead and make sure you're kind of going into these recovery points and making sure that this data is what you're supposed to see in here. Is this the correct catalog for the Linux server, which is the root of everything? No inclusions, no exclusions. It is the correct catalog for the Linux server as well, too. You could even run through an actual test recovery. Once again, check the recovery module for actual restores on file level through the agent. So here, while we're waiting on some more backups to finish up, you can cycle through these. You can check the statuses to see where they're at as far as copying data. Someone might say waiting on client for a little while it runs through the snapshot portion of the agent to see the changes, right? And in this case, in running a full, it may take a little bit even longer to run that first initial full snapshot. But 3 or 4 of these jobs are already copying data. You can watch the status of these and flip between them and check the statuses. Now, there's a couple other things you can check, too. As you start to receive backups, once again, on your dashboard, these things will flip over to start showing you your numbers. Once again, the dashboard only updates every once in a while, so I do have 3 true assets in here that have completed fulls. If you check the backup section down here, you can see that I do have fulls and incrementals for a couple of these, and I do have the full for the Linux here. You can see, once again, what schedule they're part of or when those backups ran last as well, too. The other thing you can kind of check as you're starting to get backups in here is you can run what's called the capacity report. And it's at the appliance level under the reports section here in the main tab. Go to the appliance category for the reports and run your capacity report. And run this kind of every day, every couple of hours as you're running new successful fulls. And you'll start to see that your total used space is going to go up. With each unique full that you get, this report shows you the last full before deduplication and before compression, how we see it natively. Now, it doesn't mean that's what the disk is using. That doesn't mean that's what the system is using to keep it. With inline deduplication and compression, we're using less than that. But this is how we gauge the capacity on your sets of fulls, being able to keep a landing zone so we know we can get another set of fulls in here for you and keep track of the changes for so many days. But this is a great report to keep running as you start to go through an installation and start to see your capacity going up the more and more fulls that you complete in here. When these Hyper-V and SQL and Exchange are completed, this capacity will go up. And you can run this capacity report to kind of see and measure that metric as you're completing these first one-time fulls in here, the first fulls you run. All right, a couple other quick things as we're cycling through here and waiting on backups to finish up. You can see now my Linux server, it's up to 3.5 gigs just for the incremental. You can see the Exchange, the SharePoint, and the Hyper-V servers. You know, if you start cycling through those, Hyper-V's copied about 1 gigabyte, about 1.5 meg a second. The SharePoint servers copied about a gig, just over a gig, about 1.32 megs a second. The DC Exchange, though, it still says waiting on client, which means that the agent is still technically building the snapshot through the VSS writers. That process is not finished yet because it hasn't started to copy any data yet. And once again, the Linux server, it's at about 3.5 gigs just for this incremental. Now, one of the other things why we're waiting here, I just want to kind of point out, just to give you a little bit more knowledge, is that if you are running Oracle on Linux, and you're going to run an incremental forever schedule against this Oracle server, right? We are running Oracle here. And it kind of is a best practice anyways, against any Oracle server in that file level job that it's a part of, you may want to think about excluding the Oracle working directory from any Linux client that's hosting any Oracle databases. And to do this, you're going to drop down in through the agent, and you're going to browse to your Oracle working directory for your data, wherever that happens to be. Mine happens to be under the default for U01 app Oracle, and then I have Aura Data right there. That's my Oracle data working directory for my production databases. I'm going to exclude that from any future backups, and that might help keep my incrementals down a little bit too, so it's not trying to grab those files through the agent at the same time, right? Because it does grab those at a flat kind of level, even though they're open databases. So we'll go ahead and add that exclusion to the Linux server too, to make sure we don't grab any production Oracle stuff here in the future from any file level backups. All right, so now we can see that schedule's been updated. Right, that job is still active in here. Right, it's not going to affect this job because that job was kicked off before we made that change once again. So it is still using, the full server list for this job right here. Right, any future jobs are going to take advantage of that exclusion list. All right, here we can see the Linux incremental dropped off the list, so I can once again go over and check my recent jobs tab here, and I can see that last incremental that ran here at 1:58 p.m., that was successful. All right, once again, over in the recovery tab, if you break down that Linux asset now, here at 1:59 p.m., you can see that Linux incremental. Okay, you can go into that catalog once again, verify this recovery point is the correct catalog. Is it the right volume, the right folders, the right content of data in here? Right? Remember, we just excluded this application Oracle app Aura data volume here. So the next round of backups, it's not going to try to grab this stuff that's in these directories right here anymore. It's going to save us a little bit of space. We just added those exclusions to this job that contains that server. Right? And that's this job here. We can see that server listed here. And once again, in that job, now we have excluded that working directory. All right, now we'll go ahead and keep letting these jobs run. Assets protected over here. Now it shows 3, which is correct. If I go and filter over here on true, I now have 3 over here, so the dashboard's reporting correct. You can also see now in my use space is going up a little bit. I've got about 500 megs in true growth in the last day here. You can start checking some of those metrics as well. On a new system, it's hard to kind of see this stuff until you really get going with some new fulls that are starting to run and complete. Right, usually next day, 24 hours, as we start going through the rest of the modules, you might see some more growth and some of this data, reduction data, start showing up in your dashboard as well. You can see here now that the Exchange server started to copy some data. It's at 1.1 gigs, running about 8 megs a second. It started to copy some data, so it has some catching up to do on the other 2 jobs, but it's splitting concurrent connections between those 3, and that one's running about 13 to 10 megs a second. This one's about 9 megs a second, and now the Exchange is pushing some data and it's there around 6.5 or so megs a second as well. So once again, you keep an eye on these jobs, or wait till they're done, and then you'll check your recent tab here to see the status of those when they're completed. All right, so now all of our file level agent-based backups are done. They're all cleared out of our active jobs queue. You can see over here in the manager that the last time both of those ran, once again, you can see their next scheduled date and time here as well too. All right, what you'll notice is that over here under status, you'll notice the jobs don't say running anymore. All right, if an active piece of this job were in the active queue still running, then the status of this job would still say running. One of the first things you want to do, really, once your backups are all done, you come in the next morning. We're pretending that the 3 o'clocks ran. We came in the next morning. All the jobs have ran. One of the first things you'll notice is when you log into your appliance, you'll notice that your backup summary here at the top, the numbers have switched once again from not protected, used to be 46, to now 40. And the protected used to be 0. It's now at 6. We have six assets that now at the file level, we have backups for these 6 assets. And you can see they're all marked true over here now. Once again, I could also filter on the true value and only show those as well too. And down here at the bottom in the backup section, you can see once again a summary of those same assets. You can see the operating system type, the last backups that I have in here, the number of successes, warnings, and failures once again. And then I customize this to show the schedule that they're part of, whether it's the week full, weekday incremental, or the weekday 12-hour incremental forever. You can see the schedules that these machines are a part of as well. So that's pretty cool to be able to see those. Now, what you can also do once again is under the recovery section, the recover section under the backup catalog, now you see each one of your assets. You can expand these assets out and you can see their recovery points. Each one has a full, and a couple of these I have a full and an incremental already as well too. You can also use, once again, the filter over here off to the side to filter out any of your asset backups. Maybe you have some assets with common strings in their name. You can filter those out and look at them in groups. Maybe you only want to look at the full backups in this section as well too. All right, now these backup catalogs, you do want to make sure, once again, I talked about this earlier, make sure you can go in and see this catalog and make sure this catalog contains the volumes and the directories that you want within those volumes. If you added inclusions or exclusions, make sure you see or don't see the drives you should have in there. All right, in this case, we excluded the N and V drives, so I don't see those inside of this system, inside of the catalog. Once again, check your recovery module for file level recovery for complete details on how to perform file level recovery. One little last thing I want to leave you with here that's really cool is in the Protect tab now that we have actual backups in here, I want you just to kind of see that if you highlight on your appliance, you can actually down here at the bottom, you can filter on all the successes for today, but I want you to notice that the Win 7 desktop goes off this list. Right? The reason the Win 7 desktop is off the list is because it did have a warning today. If you go into the details of the Win 7 desktop, it does have a warning today. So it's not 100% successful. It doesn't show on the only successful list, right? Because of that initial warning in here. Here's the successful, and here's the warnings. Could also do the same thing if I had failures today, but I don't have any failures. Now you can also use this filter once again, as we showed you before, to filter on common objects. So here you can see the Win Hyper-V and the Win 7 desktop together. But now you see their backup statuses in here as well too. All right, I've got one successful full for my Hyper-V. If I filter this again on successes, now I only see the Win Hyper-V. I can take the filter off here, and here's all my successes. I've got 2 for my Linux server. I see 2 successes in there. One's a full and one's an incremental. I can see the details in here of each of those jobs. Now, one more thing I want to show you too, by the way, is the backups history report. Now that we have backups going back, on all clients or all agent-based assets, now inside of my log, if I once again sort by elapsed time, you can see that the Exchange server, one of my largest servers, it took the longest to back up because I backed up these 3 machines in one big group. these other machines ran in another group as well. Okay, so you can see the bigger the group, the longer they kind of take, even though they're really about the same size. All right, but I can see the successes over here, I can see the backup type, and I can see their size. And don't forget, you can also run at the appliance level, you can run the capacity report once all of your file level agents are done, and you should have some good idea of how big your machines are across the agents depending on which volumes you're including and backing up. Maybe you're excluding some stuff and you have to remember to remove that from the overall size of the inventoried machine. All right, but here we can sort on the last full backup, and you can see my largest machines are the Exchange and Linux, then SharePoint and Hyper-V, and RDR and Win 7 Desktop are down even more. All right, but this is, once again, before deduplication, before compression. This is what Unitrends reports as their native storage, their native space. Now, once again, that's not what we're using on the device, on the backup storage. It is inline deduplication. Compression takes into effect. We will show you some of those advanced reports later on in the ongoing administration module. Make sure you check out that once we get some backups in the system to start showing you that stuff as well, too. So there was a really good overview on the file level agents for the Unitrends system.